What is up, and welcome into the block. I have got my guys, Blake Brockermeyer, Carl Reed, here ready to talk some college football. I am Colin Kennedy, live from Nashville, Tennessee. That's right, we brought the block to the Volunteer State. No Tennessee talk today, unfortunately. Why? We got another conference preview special. Big Ten Day here on the block. Before we get into it, you at home, like, share, subscribe, build up this YouTube channel, and help us build up the block as we continue to roll out this show in anticipation of the 2022 season. Speaking of the 2022 season, the Big Ten, a lot at stake. We had Michigan go to the playoff last year, Ohio State with high expectations, Penn State, Michigan State, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin. The list goes on and on. A lot of interesting teams when we talk about the Big Ten. So where do I want to start? None other than projected order of finish. Going to the Big Ten East first, Blake. Loaded conference. How do you have it panning out?
I've got Rutgers bringing up the rear. I think Greg Schiano is going to take him a couple of years to get this thing rolling. He's done a nice job. They've got a nice freshman quarterback there in Gavin Wimscott, who I think has got a lot of potential, but it's going to be a little bit longer for them. Indiana, I've got next. Tom Allen is a guy that does a great job, great culture at Indiana. Last year, they underachieved a little bit, in my opinion. I like Connor Bazelak, the transfer from Missouri. I think, they've got a lot of questions. They lost some production last year, so we'll see how they do. I expect them to do better. Next, I've got Michigan State. I think Michigan State obviously had a pretty good year last year with Kenneth Walker III. They replaced him with Jared Broussard from Colorado, completely different type back. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. Lots of questions on their defense. I have nightmares thinking about their pass defense from last season, so they can't possibly be that bad again this year. They brought in a nice group of transfers on their back end. I like their linebacking unit. Peyton Thorne returns, of course, who's an excellent quarterback, and Jared Reed is a top receiver for them. So I think they'll do better. They lose a lot of offensive linemen as well. Next, I have Maryland. I think, Maryland is a team that looks like they have their best team that they've had on paper. Mike Locksley there. Tagovailoa is an excellent quarterback. I think he's very accurate passer, can run a little bit. Can he stay healthy is kind of the key to their season. Jalen Duncan's one of the top left tackles in college football. Lots of questions on their defense. I expect them to maybe have an upset this year. So I think it'll be curious to see how they do there. Next team I have is Penn State. They've got Sean Clifford back, Nick Singleton back, Parker Washington. Their offensive line really concerns me, but I think their defense is going to be pretty good despite some of the losses that they had. And then the top two teams for me is Michigan. They've got some questions at quarterback on who's going to play. I think Cade McNamara is going to start for them and do a pretty good job for them. They have a very good offensive line. Their tight end unit is really good. Their wide receivers look like they've got some more explosiveness than they had last year. Defensively, they lose a lot of production, so a little bit of question marks there. But they should be undefeated by the time they get to Columbus to play the reigning, or not reigning champions, but in my prediction, that the champions this year in Ohio State. There's not a lot to be said about them that hadn't been said. They're loaded at offense with 3 Heisman Trophy candidates. Defensively, I think they've taken a huge step forward with Jim Knowles. They'll have a better scheme. They'll do better on defense, and they've got a very good schedule for them. It sets up to a lot of success.
Blake, I'm seeing that you put Maryland over Michigan State. What were some of the key factors in that decision for you?
I just think I like their quarterback at Maryland. I think Michigan State's just got to prove to me defensively that they can stop people in the air. Last year they were really bad. They brought in some new transfers this year. They have guys who return that got a lot of experience, which should pay off. So I think those two teams are kind of interchangeable to me. I think Mel Tucker is going to do a great job at Michigan State. Not sure if this is the year for them. Their schedule's brutal. So I think those two teams you can kind of flip a coin on, but I have a feeling that Maryland's going to overachieve a little bit this year.
Well, interesting stuff from our guy Blake Brockermeyer on the Big Ten West. Now transitioning over, or on the Big Ten East, I should say, excuse me. But speaking of the Big Ten West, all I see on my Twitter feed these days is run the rock, run the rock, run the rock. So Carl Reed, congratulations. I'm going to reward you with all that nonsense by forcing you to pick the projected order of finish in the Big Ten West.
Well, it's definitely a run-heavy league, when you come into the Big Ten West and the teams that are going to play a real rugged style of football. We're going to start at the bottom with Northwestern. Northwestern just has a lot of catching up to do, especially in the recruiting department when it comes to some of the other Big Ten schools. Illinois is our next team. Illinois is going to be led by Isaiah Williams, who's kind of a Swiss Army knife for them, slot receiver. Sometimes he lines up outside. He returns some kicks, and he has spent some time starting at quarterback. Nebraska is an intriguing team because they have a lot of pressure on them, and they haven't been as strong as they like, but they did add some key additions in the transfer portal. Casey Thompson at quarterback from Texas. They're expecting big things about him, and also a receiver he brought from Texas with him, Marcus Washington. When you look at Purdue is kind of an enigma. You know that Jeff Brom is going to throw the ball around a ton. He always knocks somebody off. They're a very tough team to defend. He's elevated in the passing game. The University of Minnesota, they have a chance, I think, to make a special run this season. We'll talk about them a little bit later in the show, but a lot of guys are going to shake their head when I say this because I'm a run the rock kind of guy. But the best player on their football team is their center, John Michael Schmitz. He's an All-American candidate in the making. Is going to play a long time in the National Football League. You have to go to Wisconsin. Wisconsin, huge offensive lineman. Every year they have a dominant running game. They have a superstar tailback coming back this year in Braelon Allen. And they've got some receiver help. They've added Keontez Lewis from UCLA out the transfer portal to help them at receiver. And my sources have been giving me rave reviews on Chris Brooks Jr. Chris Brooks Sr., his father, was a starting receiver years ago at the University of Nebraska. It's been great raves of Chris Brooks. He could contribute early this year. And then I have the University of Iowa. They're returning 14 starters off of a 10-win team. And Kirk Ferentz is the model of consistency. I think that Iowa is going to be the team to beat in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, when you look at the West, I see a lot of great defense. I mean, when I look overall, maybe besides Purdue, I look at teams in this conference that are tough, hard-nosed, physical teams on the defensive side of the ball. So whoever can scheme a little bit, be able to run the ball, throw it when they need to, is going to win the West. It's going to be a tough division. I think Nebraska is a wild card in this division, and I think Purdue is one of those teams, kind of like Carl mentioned, that's a sleeper team that you never know what you're going to get with them. You watch them some weeks and they look unstoppable, and you see them, other times and they look helpless. So be curious to see what they look like, but I bet you they knock somebody off this year as well.
Going to be interesting to see when we talk about these teams specifically, which quarterback helps their team the most. Outside of Purdue, it seems like a lot up in the air at the quarterback position within this division. Whoever has it pan out the best may work out in their favor when we talk about contending towards the top of the Big Ten West. So you two have Ohio State and Iowa at the top of the conference. But let's talk about players at the top of the conference. I feel like I know where we're going, but Carl, when we speak about the Big Ten and the Heisman Trophy race, who are some players you're highlighting who could potentially contend for a spot in New York?
Well, it has to start off at Ohio State. Ohio State is the best team in the Big Ten. I don't expect them to lose. I expect them to go on a tear through the league this year and play in the college football playoff. So I think you have to start with them with C.J. Stroud, superstar quarterback for Ohio State. He can do it all. He can make all of the throws. He has great decision-making. He's throwing to a top-flight group of receivers. He can move with his legs and extend plays. He's just an unbelievable talent. Is going to be competing with Bryce Young to see who's the first pick in the draft. And the Heisman Trophy likely will come down to those two guys and how they lead their teams this year. Staying with Ohio State, they have a special running back, TreVeyon Henderson. Could it go to him? Could he have one of those years, depending on people defending, going overboard and defending the passing game, and suddenly he goes 1,800 yards and 25 plus touchdowns and makes himself the front runner for the Heisman? That has happened before with guys in the past. So he's a Heisman worthy candidate also. And then we have to go to Wisconsin, Braelon Allen. He is a stud at running back playing for Wisconsin behind an NFL caliber offensive line. You know, the tailback at Wisconsin is going to get a ton of opportunities to run the rock. He could run his way into the conversation as we go down the stretch in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I like Carl's picks. I think he's right. Ohio State's going to stack hardware this season. They're going to have a special year this year. I expect them to play for the national championship. I look at Jaxon Smith-Njigba as a guy that you got to put on that list, though. I mean, he is likely to win the Biletnikoff. He's an explosive receiver that can do it all, play inside and out. I like this guy as a top, 10 or 15 pick at the worst. And I think he potentially could play himself in it as well.
I'm interested to see what Blake Corum does in this conference for Michigan, knowing that offensive style. But look, man, I'm the leader of the Braelon Allen fan club, so I love the pick for my guy Carl Reed. I'm excited to see what he does for the Wisconsin Badgers behind that loaded offensive line. That's the key there. Let's talk about that Big Ten West a little bit more, guys, because you mentioned Nebraska. Intriguing team with a ton of pressure, and Blake, all eyes fall on one Scott Frost. Is he the hot seat coach within this conference?
Yeah, I think he definitely is the hot seat guy on this conference. I mean, you look at the conference, there's a lot of established coaches. There's a few new ones, but I think, he's the one that's got the bullseye on his back. He has to exceed expectations this year. I think Nebraska personally, and we'll get into it here in a little bit, is going to have a very good season this year. Their schedule sets up nicely for them. I think, but Scott Frost, if he doesn't win, I would say at least 7 games this year and show a lot of improvement, being able to win those close games that they haven't been able to win the last couple of years. I think he's the guy to keep an eye on in the Big Ten as far as on the hot seat. And I think that they want to keep him, but he's got to give him something, got to give him some hope this year. And I think that this year's schedule, in my opinion, gives Nebraska fans hope that they can have a good season.
Nobody wants Scott Frost to win more than the Nebraska faithful. He's one of their own, big-time quarterback in his day. But they do have high expectations, and Nebraska wants to get back to competing for national championships. That's their goal, and that's what they want the program to be. A lot of pressure going into this season on Scott Frost.
A little bit more from Blake Brockermeyer on potentially exceeding expectations and Scott Frost in today's show. I like the teasers we're squeezing in. So again, you at home, like, share, subscribe here on the block. Let's keep the Ohio State love going, shall we? Why not? Carl, I want to know, as we talk about this conference, who's the true freshman of the year that you're keeping an eye on when we talk about the Big Ten?
I'm keeping an eye on C.J. Hicks, freshman linebacker at Ohio State. Had an outstanding spring this year for the Buckeyes, going in as an early enrollee. He is box office. He plays very well in between the tackles. He does a great job in space, scoring from sideline to sideline. In this day of RPO offenses, he can play off the hash and he can get in the zone. He can also line up against some of those teams in that league that like to run with 2 tight ends and H-backs and play downhill. I think he's going to be an instant impact guy, and we're going to be talking about him at Ohio State a lot over the next 3 football seasons.
A very solid pick there from you, Carl. I'm very interested to see what that young guy does in an Ohio State linebacker room that you could potentially earn your way onto the field. He was obviously a very highly rated prospect at the inside linebacker position, which is very rare, it feels like, in today's day and age. Says a lot about the special talent that he is. All right, so we talk Ohio State a lot. I want to discard the Buckeyes for a second, Blake, and go to you on this. I like your NFL draft prospect breakdowns. So If I asked you to give me the non-Ohio State NFL draft prospect you're most excited about, you would say who?
Northwestern's left tackle, Peter Skoronski. I mean, we did a breakdown on him not too long ago. He's an excellent offensive lineman, plays left tackle for them, started the last 2 years there. And he's got great technique, great athleticism, good feet. He's got all the attributes that you need in one as your left tackle. He's a guy that can move people in the run game. He can mirror and get to the spot in the pass game to block all these great rushers in the Big Ten. So he's a guy that I got my eye on outside of the many Ohio State guys that will go in the first round that I think has potential to be a very good player at the next level.
I'd be surprised if he didn't go in the first round. He's the total package. He's the left tackle, great in pass protection, great in the downhill run game. I'm excited to watch him this year as well, Blake.
Northwestern quietly churning out some very good offensive linemen recently. I'm excited to see what he can do for the Wildcats in 2022. Let's talk about what we are excited for most. Maybe a little bit outlandish, but hey, that's the fun in preseason talk. It's time for our hottest takes in the Big Ten Conference. Carl, I'm going to you first because you always deliver on these things. What's your hot take when we talk about the Big Ten in 2022?
My hot take on the Big Ten this year is that the University of Minnesota is going to have a 10-win season, and PJ Fleck is going to once again be the hottest candidate in next year's coaching cycle. Everybody's going to be coveting him, and Minnesota's going to have to either pony up or watch him roll his boat somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's a little out there for me. You look at Minnesota's schedule; they play at Michigan State, at Penn State, at Wisconsin. So those are 3 games that they're going to really struggle at, and then they play at home versus Iowa and Purdue. So they basically they can only lose 2 games to win 10, and I just don't see that happening.
Blake, if after Minnesota wins 10 games, I'm going to have to get PJ to sign one of those oars for you so you can put it up on your wall behind you. We have to see it every time we come on the show.
I like it. I'll do that. I will do that for sure if they win over 10 games or more.
All right, gentlemen, let's keep this thing rolling. Blake, your hot take in the Big Ten Conference is?
It's kind of like we talked about earlier with Nebraska. I think Scott Frost puts together a very good season for Nebraska. I think that they win 8+ games this year. I mean, you look at their schedule, they've got 2 really tough home games versus Oklahoma and Wisconsin, and then they go on the road versus Purdue, Michigan, and Iowa. So it's not an easy schedule, but as long as they win the games that they're supposed to win and potentially upset, one of those teams, then I think that they can achieve winning 8 games or more. And I think Scott Frost is going to put it together this year and give Nebraska fans hope for the future.
Blake, that's a tall order for Nebraska to win 8 this year. I know you say their schedule is favorable, but we're going to see how well the quarterback comes out and plays this year. And also their defense has had questions over the years. How well will they come out and play on defense? I think 8 wins is going to be tough sledding for them. But if they do get 8, Scott Frost stays at Nebraska for sure.
Well, they're hot takes, and while we both think that all of these are maybe far-fetched, I'm going to tell you right now, mine is 100% true. My hot take when we talk about the Big Ten, J.J. McCarthy, I hate to say it, but he's not going to start a single game in 2022. And why is that? Cade McNamara will hold on to the starting job for the Michigan Wolverines at the signal caller spot. I say the same thing about Cade McNamara as I do for Stetson Bennett. What did he ever do to y'all? Why do you all hate him so much? We're talking about a guy in Cade McNamara that beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten championship, got you to the college football playoff along the way, and here he is ready again to lead the Wolverines in 2022. Now look, I might think that J.J. McCarthy is the overall better talent, but I think right now Cade McNamara has made himself the clear-cut favorite to be the leader of this team, and I don't think that he has slipped up enough to lose that spot as we build up towards the season, a pivotal one when we talk about what the Wolverines will do as they follow up a very special 2021 season. Carl, I just feel like this is going to be something that he has to wait out. I want to hear what you have to say on that. But Blake, Cade McNamara is good. What are we talking about here, you know?
Yeah, he's a good player. I mean, I think he does what he's asked to do at Michigan. And last season, Michigan had a very good defense that they relied on. They relied on the ground and pound run game that they, typically do. I think this year you might see a different Cade McNamara because I think Michigan's offense is going to have to do more this year. Their defense should probably, I'm expecting a drop off this year. I mean, they lose so much talent on every level. And I think their offense has potential to be very, very good this season. They're stacked at all the critical positions. They've got some depth. So I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan, tries to open it up a little bit. Their schedule is a great schedule for them. I don't see them having a lot of trouble early on in the season at all. So he can get in a groove. So that's, I think he's underrated, but I think we'll find out this year, depending on what he's asked to do. And he's got some experience now. So JJ McCarthy, I would expect to play some. He's a talented guy. But I think McNamara is the guy that's going to get the ball when it's critical. And, and the Ohio State game is going to come down to whether they can win the season or not, win the division.
In this day and age, when you have a talent like JJ McCarthy and he doesn't start, everybody immediately runs to the transfer portal. You become a hot recruit all over again. But I want to go the other way on this. I think that for certain guys in certain situations, there is a tremendous amount of value on staying at the University of Michigan, continuing to be developed by Coach Harbaugh and his staff in an NFL offense, and an offense that gets guys ready to play in the NFL, and just continuing to compete. Everybody doesn't have to enter the transfer portal. There are guys throughout the country that are not going to start this season, and their first instinct is going to be to run to the portal. But there'll be a few guys who are smart that stay and continue to develop their game. And by developing their game, they're going to give themselves and their football future much more hope in the long term by allowing themselves to be coached and their weaknesses being corrected, because there's always a reason why one guy is starting and the other guy is not.
Yeah, I agree with you, Carl. I think it's, great to stay, but at some point, I mean, McNamara's got more years of eligibility left as well. So at some point he's got to get on the field and play. He's a good quarterback. He missed the spring with an injury that probably set him back a little bit. And so he'll get an opportunity this year to get on the field and do his thing, but he's going to have to outshine McNamara if he's going to have a chance to come in and start this year.
Michigan Wolverines quarterback situation is quietly one of the biggest storylines within this conference, so I'm excited to see how that shakes out. Of course, it was massive last year, but the Wolverines had a whole lot of talent en route to that college football playoff appearance. We will appear here very soon yet again, same time, same place tomorrow. I will be out the rest of the week, so don't miss me too much, guys, because I know I will miss you too. You at home, like, share, subscribe to see more of these two, and check them out on Twitter. Then head to 247sports.com for all things college football and the Big Ten Conference. Gentlemen, it's always fun.